Question 1. Quality control measures reveal that a driver in Ontario observes a person lying on the shoulder of a busy provincial highway, appearing to be in distress. The driver's immediate instinct is to stop and offer assistance. Considering the regulatory framework governing road safety in Ontario, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the driver? Option A. Continue driving and assume someone else will stop or that the person is not in genuine need of assistance. Option B. Safely pull over to the shoulder of the road at a reasonable distance from the distressed person, activate hazard lights, and assess the situation from the vehicle before exiting or offering direct assistance. Option C. Immediately stop the vehicle in the traffic lane to get closer to the distressed person, as their need for help is urgent. Option D. Stop the vehicle abruptly on the shoulder directly beside the distressed person, exit the vehicle immediately, and approach the individual to inquire about their well-being. Correct answer is B. Safely pull over to the shoulder of the road at a reasonable distance from the distressed person, activate hazard lights, and assess the situation from the vehicle before exiting or offering direct assistance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to balance the immediate need to assist a distressed individual with the overarching legal and safety obligations mandated by the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. The driver must make a swift judgment call that prioritizes safety and compliance while also demonstrating responsible citizenship. The challenge lies in navigating the potential risks associated with stopping on a busy roadway and ensuring that any assistance provided does not inadvertently create a further hazard. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves stopping the vehicle safely, away from traffic, and assessing the situation from a secure position. This approach aligns with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act's general duty of care for drivers to operate their vehicles safely and to avoid causing danger to persons or property. Specifically, Section 169 of the Act, concerning duties of driver at accident, while focused on accidents, implies a broader responsibility to act reasonably and safely when encountering potential hazards or individuals in distress on or near the roadway. By pulling over to a safe location, the driver mitigates the risk of causing a secondary collision and creates a controlled environment to assess the situation and offer appropriate assistance, which could include calling emergency services if necessary. This prioritizes the safety of all road users and the individual in need. Incorrect approach is analysis. Stopping abruptly in a traffic lane, regardless of the driver's intent to help, directly violates the fundamental principles of safe driving and the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. Such an action creates an immediate and severe hazard for other vehicles, increasing the likelihood of a collision. Failing to assess the situation from a safe vantage point before exiting the vehicle or interacting with the distressed individual also demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a disregard for personal safety and the safety of others. Attempting to provide assistance without first ensuring a safe environment is a regulatory and ethical failure. Ignoring the situation entirely, while avoiding immediate personal risk, fails to meet the broader societal expectation of responsible conduct when encountering someone in apparent distress, and could be seen as a dereliction of a moral duty of care, though not explicitly a violation of a specific Traffic Act provision, unless it directly contributes to a subsequent hazard. Professional reasoning. Professionals encountering such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations. First, assess the immediate environment for safety. If a safe stopping location is available, utilize it. Second, consider the nature of the distress observed. If it appears to be a medical emergency or a dangerous situation, the priority is to contact emergency services. Third, if direct assistance is to be offered, ensure it is done without creating further risk to oneself or others. This might involve remaining in the vehicle and communicating, or exiting only after confirming the immediate surroundings are secure. The overarching principle is to act responsibly and in accordance with traffic laws and general safety protocols. Question 2. Quality control measures reveal an examiner administering a Carlow driver's test in Ontario is feeling pressured by a candidate who is visibly anxious and repeatedly expresses concerns about failing, stating they have invested significant time and money in lessons. How should the examiner proceed to ensure compliance with regulatory standards and professional ethics? Option A. Offer the candidate reassurance and provide additional verbal cues and guidance during the test to help them navigate potentially difficult maneuvers, acknowledging their expressed concerns about failing. Option B. Engage in a more relaxed and conversational tone with the candidate throughout the test, discussing their driving experiences and offering personal anecdotes to ease their tension. Option C. Strictly adhere to the Carlow driver's test syllabus and Ontario's traffic laws, objectively assessing the candidate's performance against established criteria without allowing personal feelings or the candidate's expressed anxieties to influence the evaluation. Option D. Focus on the candidate's overall positive attitude and willingness to learn, potentially overlooking minor driving errors that do not pose an immediate safety hazard to reflect their perceived effort. The correct answer is C. Strictly adhere to the Carlow driver's test syllabus and Ontario's traffic laws, objectively assessing the candidate's performance against established criteria without allowing personal feelings or the candidate's expressed anxieties to influence the evaluation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a driver's desire to pass their test and the examiner's duty to uphold road safety standards and regulatory compliance. The examiner must remain impartial, objective, and adhere strictly to the Carlow driver's test syllabus and provincial regulations, even when faced with a candidate's emotional state or persuasive tactics. Failure to do so compromises the integrity of the testing process and public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the examiner maintaining strict adherence to the Carlow driver's test syllabus and the relevant provincial traffic laws of Ontario. This approach requires the examiner to objectively assess the candidate's performance against the established criteria, irrespective of any external pressures or the candidate's expressed anxieties. The examiner's primary responsibility is to ensure the candidate demonstrates safe driving practices and a thorough understanding of road rules as mandated by Ontario's Ministry of Transportation. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect public safety and maintain the credibility of the licensing process. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the examiner allowing personal sympathy to influence their judgment, leading them to overlook minor errors or provide excessive guidance beyond what is permitted by the Carlow driver's test syllabus. This violates the principle of objective assessment and can result in an unqualified driver being licensed, posing a risk to themselves and others on Ontario's roads. It also undermines the fairness of the testing process for other candidates. Another incorrect approach is for the examiner to become overly conversational or engage in extensive personal discussions with the candidate during the test. Some rapport building is acceptable. Excessive non-testing related conversation can distract the examiner from their primary duty of observation and assessment, potentially missing critical driving faults. It also deviates from the structured nature of the Carlow driver's test, which is designed to evaluate specific driving competencies. A further incorrect approach involves the examiner making subjective judgments about the candidate's potential or effort, rather than strictly evaluating their demonstrated performance against the Carlow driver's test criteria. The test is a pass/fail assessment based on observable actions and adherence to rules, not an evaluation of a candidate's perceived future driving ability or their perceived level of effort. This subjective approach is not supported by the regulatory framework governing driver testing in Ontario. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing the specific requirements of the Carlow driver's test syllabus and all relevant Ontario traffic legislation. 2. Maintaining strict objectivity and impartiality throughout the assessment. 3. Focusing solely on observable driving behaviors and adherence to established criteria. 4. Recognizing and resisting any internal or external pressures that could compromise the integrity of the test. 5. Documenting all observations and decisions clearly and accurately, adhering to established reporting procedures. Question 3. Cost-benefit analysis shows that while completing the Ontario driving test quickly might seem appealing, the primary objective of the Ministry of Transportation, MTO, is to ensure road safety. Considering the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO's driver examination standards, which approach best reflects the requirements for a successful driving test? Option A. Applying safe driving practices only when the examiner is directly observing and becoming overly anxious or erratic when under pressure. Option B. Arguing with the examiner about minor infractions or perceived unfairness during the test to ensure all perceived mistakes are addressed. Option C. Prioritizing speed and completing maneuvers quickly to finish the test efficiently, even if it means slightly exceeding speed limits or rushing certain observations. Option D. Consistently demonstrating a thorough understanding and application of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO's driver examination criteria throughout the entire test, including active mirror checks, clear signaling, appropriate speed, and safe execution of maneuvers. The correct answer is D. Consistently demonstrating a thorough understanding and application of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO's driver examination criteria throughout the entire test, including active mirror checks, clear signaling, appropriate speed, and safe execution of maneuvers. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for drivers in Ontario, Canada, where the Ministry of Transportation, MTO, sets strict guidelines for road safety and driver competency. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to pass the driving test with the absolute requirement to adhere to all traffic laws and demonstrate safe driving practices, even under pressure. A driver's judgment and adherence to rules are paramount, and any deviation can have serious consequences, including failing the test and potentially jeopardizing road safety. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a driver consistently demonstrating a thorough understanding and application of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and MTO's driver examination criteria throughout the entire test. This means actively checking mirrors, signaling intentions clearly and in advance, maintaining appropriate speed for conditions, observing all traffic control devices, and executing maneuvers smoothly and safely. The regulatory justification is clear. The MTO's objective is to ensure all licensed drivers are competent and safe, and the test is designed to assess this. Adhering strictly to all rules and demonstrating defensive driving techniques directly fulfills this objective. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize speed and completing maneuvers quickly over safety and rule adherence. This fails to meet the MTO's standards for safe driving, as it suggests a driver may be willing to cut corners or take risks to finish faster. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the Highway Traffic Act, which emphasizes caution and adherence to posted limits and safe practices. Another incorrect approach is to only apply safe driving practices when the examiner is directly observing, or to become overly anxious and erratic. This demonstrates a lack of ingrained safe driving habits and an inability to perform under pressure, which are critical for safe operation of a vehicle on public roads. The MTO expects consistent safe behavior, not performative safety. A further incorrect approach is to argue with the examiner about minor infractions or perceived unfairness during the test. While understanding the rules is important, the examiner's assessment is based on objective criteria. Arguing detracts from the driver's ability to focus on driving and demonstrates poor judgment and an inability to accept constructive feedback, which are essential for continuous improvement as a driver. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must prioritize regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The decision-making process for a driver during a test should involve a constant internal checklist of MTO requirements and Highway Traffic Act rules. When faced with a situation that might tempt a deviation, e.g., perceived pressure to speed up, the driver must recall the primary objective, safe and legal operation. If an error occurs, the professional response is to acknowledge it internally, correct the behavior immediately if possible, and continue to drive safely for the remainder of the test, rather than letting it derail their performance or lead to further mistakes. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of the driver consistently exceeding the posted speed limit by 10 km/h on provincial highways in Ontario. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the system to take? Option A. Automatically transmit a speeding violation notice to the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. Option B. Provide an audible and visual alert to the driver, indicating the current speed and the posted limit, and suggesting a reduction in speed. Option C. Log the speeding incidents for a future report to the driver's insurance provider. Option D. Initiate a temporary remote deactivation of the vehicle's engine until the speed is reduced. The correct answer is B. Provide an audible and visual alert to the driver, indicating the current speed and the posted limit, and suggesting a reduction in speed. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a potential lapse in regulatory compliance regarding the safe operation of a motor vehicle in Ontario, Canada. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and accurate judgment to prevent potential harm and ensure adherence to provincial traffic laws. The driver's actions, if unchecked, could lead to a collision or a traffic infraction, necessitating a prompt and appropriate response from the monitoring entity. The best approach involves the system immediately alerting the driver to the observed unsafe behavior and providing clear, actionable guidance to correct it. This aligns with the principles of proactive safety and driver education, mandated by the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, which emphasizes responsible driving and the prevention of accidents. By intervening directly and constructively, the system fulfills its role in promoting safe road practices and mitigating immediate risks. An approach that involves simply logging the event without immediate driver notification fails to address the present danger. This passive logging neglects the proactive safety obligations that underpin traffic regulations, which are designed to prevent incidents in real time, not just document them after the fact. Another incorrect approach would be for the system to immediately report the driver to the authorities without any prior warning or opportunity for correction. This is an overly punitive response that bypasses the educational and corrective intent of many monitoring systems and potentially contravenes principles of fairness and due process. The goal is to improve driver behavior, not solely to penalize it, especially for minor infractions that can be self-corrected. Finally, an approach that involves disabling the vehicle remotely without a clear and present, imminent danger of severe harm is an overreach. While safety is paramount, such drastic measures should be reserved for situations where immediate, catastrophic risk is unavoidable through less intrusive means, and would likely require specific legal authorization or predefined emergency protocols not typically associated with standard driver monitoring. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes immediate risk assessment, followed by the least intrusive yet effective intervention. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements for driver behavior, evaluating the severity of the observed infraction, and selecting a response that balances safety, education, and proportionality. Question 5. During the evaluation of a driver's road test in Ontario, what is the most critical aspect the examiner will be assessing regarding the driver's interaction with traffic signals and signs? Option A: failing to check blind spots before changing lanes or turning. Option B: making a turn from the incorrect lane. Option C: consistent adherence to all posted speed limits, observation of traffic signals and signs, and clear demonstration of right-of-way at intersections, while maintaining proper lane discipline and signaling intentions. Option D: proceeding at a speed significantly below the posted limit when no apparent hazard exists. The correct answer is C: consistent adherence to all posted speed limits, observation of traffic signals and signs, and clear demonstration of right-of-way at intersections, while maintaining proper lane discipline and signaling intentions. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to demonstrate not only their ability to control the vehicle, but also their understanding of road rules and safe driving practices in a specific, real-world context within Ontario. The examiner's role is to assess compliance with the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and associated regulations, ensuring the driver poses no undue risk to themselves or others. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these rules consistently and safely under observation. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the driver consistently adhering to all posted speed limits, observing traffic signals and signs, and demonstrating a clear understanding of right-of-way rules at intersections, all while maintaining appropriate lane discipline and signaling intentions. This directly aligns with the requirements of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, which mandates safe and lawful operation of a motor vehicle. Specifically, sections pertaining to speed limits, e.g., Section 128, traffic control signals, e.g., Section 144, and right-of-way, e.g., Section 136, are paramount. Demonstrating these behaviors shows the examiner that the driver has internalized and can apply the fundamental principles of safe driving as codified in Ontario law. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding at a speed significantly below the posted limit without a clear hazard or obstruction present can be interpreted as hesitant or lacking in situational awareness, potentially impeding traffic flow, which is contrary to safe and efficient driving principles expected under the Highway Traffic Act. Failing to check blind spots before changing lanes or turning, even if the maneuver is otherwise executed correctly, is a direct violation of safe driving practices and implicitly breaches the duty of care required under Ontario law to ensure a maneuver can be completed safely. Making a turn from the wrong lane, even if the turn itself is completed without incident, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of lane usage and traffic flow, which is a contravention of rules governing vehicle positioning on the roadway as outlined in the Highway Traffic Act. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such evaluations with a mindset of demonstrating competence and adherence to established regulations. This involves a proactive understanding of the relevant legal framework, in this case, the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, and anticipating potential scenarios where these rules apply. Decision-making should prioritize safety and compliance, always erring on the side of caution and clear demonstration of understanding. A driver should mentally review the rules of the road and practice them diligently, understanding that the evaluation is a test of their ability to integrate these rules into their driving behavior. Question 6. What factors determine the legality of operating a newly purchased vehicle in Ontario that was previously registered and insured in Quebec? Option A. Driving the vehicle with the Quebec license plates and insurance until a traffic stop occurs. Option B. Obtaining a temporary Ontario permit and delaying full registration until after a planned move. Option C. Relying on the existing Quebec registration and insurance to operate the vehicle temporarily in Ontario. Option D. Ensuring the vehicle has valid Ontario registration and proof of Ontario motor vehicle liability insurance. The correct answer is D. Ensuring the vehicle has valid Ontario registration and proof of Ontario motor vehicle liability insurance. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to balance immediate personal convenience with the strict legal requirements of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act regarding vehicle registration and insurance. A failure to comply can result in significant penalties, including fines and impoundment of the vehicle. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal obligations are met before operating a vehicle on public roads. The correct approach involves ensuring the vehicle is properly registered and insured in Ontario before driving it. This means completing all necessary paperwork with the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, MTO, and obtaining valid Ontario insurance. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to Section 7 of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, which mandates that no person shall drive a motor vehicle on a highway unless it is registered and insured. This ensures public safety and accountability on the roads. An incorrect approach would be to drive the vehicle using temporary out-of-province plates and insurance, assuming it is sufficient for a short period in Ontario. This is a regulatory failure because Ontario law requires vehicles operated on its highways to be registered and insured under Ontario regulations, regardless of their origin or the duration of their stay. Relying on out-of-province documentation bypasses the MTO's oversight and the province's insurance framework, potentially leaving victims of accidents without adequate recourse. Another incorrect approach would be to delay registration and insurance until a later date, citing the inconvenience of immediate compliance. This is a direct violation of the Highway Traffic Act and demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations. It creates a significant risk for the driver and others on the road, as an unregistered and uninsured vehicle is not recognized by the provincial system and offers no protection in case of an incident. The professional reasoning process for a driver in this situation should begin with a clear understanding of the legal requirements for operating a vehicle in Ontario. This involves consulting the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and understanding the specific provisions related to vehicle registration and insurance. The driver should then prioritize fulfilling these obligations before any operation of the vehicle on public roads. If there is any uncertainty, seeking clarification from the MTO or a qualified legal professional is advisable. The principle of innocent until proven guilty does not apply to regulatory compliance. Proactive adherence is the standard. Question 7. Quality control measures reveal that during a Carlow driver's test, a candidate observes a pedestrian on the side of the road who appears to be in distress and gesturing for help. The candidate is unsure if the situation warrants an immediate stop or if it is a distraction. What is the most appropriate course of action for the candidate? Option A. Stop the vehicle and exit to assess the pedestrian's needs without consulting the examiner. Option B. Continue driving as normal, focusing solely on the test requirements and ignoring the pedestrian. Option C. Inform the examiner of the observed situation and request their guidance on how to proceed. Option D. Immediately pull over to the side of the road to offer assistance to the pedestrian. The correct answer is C. Inform the examiner of the observed situation and request their guidance on how to proceed. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to balance the immediate need to assist a distressed individual with the overarching legal and safety requirements of the Carlow driver's test. The examiner's role is to assess the candidate's ability to operate a vehicle safely and in compliance with all traffic laws and test protocols. Introducing an unscheduled stop for a non-emergency situation, even with good intentions, can compromise the assessment of the candidate's driving skills and adherence to test procedures. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of the Carlow driver's test while demonstrating responsible citizenship within the bounds of the test's objectives. This means acknowledging the situation, assessing its urgency from a safety perspective, and making a judgment call that upholds the test's requirements. The best professional practice is to inform the examiner of the situation and request their guidance, as they are responsible for the conduct and outcome of the test. This approach demonstrates respect for the test's authority, allows for a joint decision-making process that considers both the candidate's intentions and the test's requirements, and avoids unilateral actions that could be misinterpreted as a failure to follow instructions or a lack of focus on the driving task. An incorrect approach would be to immediately stop the vehicle without consulting the examiner. This action could be seen as a failure to follow the examiner's instructions or a deviation from the planned test route and objectives. It bypasses the examiner's authority and judgment, which is crucial for the assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation entirely. While this might seem like prioritizing the test, it demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and potentially a disregard for the well-being of others, which are also important aspects of responsible driving. A third incorrect approach would be to stop and then attempt to provide extensive assistance, thereby significantly delaying the test and potentially failing to complete essential driving maneuvers required for evaluation. This shows poor judgment in balancing competing priorities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Situational awareness. Quickly assess the nature and urgency of the observed situation. 2. Protocol adherence. Understand the rules and objectives of the current task, in this case, the Carlow driver's test. 3. Communication. Inform the responsible authority, the examiner, of the situation and seek their input. 4. Risk assessment. Evaluate the potential consequences of any action or inaction on the test's integrity and safety. 5. Judicious action. Make a decision that best balances the immediate circumstances with the overarching requirements and ethical considerations. Question 8. The control framework reveals that Mr. Henderson is applying for his provisional driving license in Ontario, Canada, and has a minor speeding conviction from 5 years ago. What is the most appropriate professional guidance to ensure compliance with Ontario's licensing regulations? Option A. Advise Mr. Henderson to accurately complete all sections of the application form, including declaring his past speeding conviction as required by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, and ensure all supporting documentation is in order. Option B. Suggest Mr. Henderson omit the past speeding conviction from his application, as it was a minor offense from a considerable time ago and unlikely to impact his eligibility. Option C. Submit Mr. Henderson's application without a detailed review, assuming he has accurately filled out all the necessary information. Option D. Focus solely on preparing Mr. Henderson for the practical driving test, as the application process details are a separate administrative matter. The correct answer is A. Advise Mr. Henderson to accurately complete all sections of the application form, including declaring his past speeding conviction as required by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, and ensure all supporting documentation is in order. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a driver, Mr. Henderson, is seeking to obtain his provisional driving license in Ontario, Canada. The challenge lies in ensuring that the application process adheres strictly to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations, particularly concerning the eligibility and documentation requirements for new drivers. Mr. Henderson has a minor conviction for speeding from 5 years ago, which is relevant to his character and potentially his driving history. But the primary concern is the accuracy and completeness of the information provided on the application form. The professional responsibility is to guide Mr. Henderson through the process legally and ethically, ensuring no misrepresentation occurs, even if the misrepresentation is unintentional due to oversight. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Mr. Henderson's application form to ensure all sections are completed accurately and truthfully, with particular attention to declaring any past driving-related offenses as required by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. This aligns with the Highway Traffic Act's emphasis on honest disclosure of information for licensing purposes. The regulatory justification stems from the principle of utmost good faith in applications to government bodies. Providing complete and accurate information is a legal obligation, and failure to do so, even if not deliberately fraudulent, can lead to the invalidation of the license and potential penalties. Ethical considerations also demand transparency and honesty in all dealings with regulatory authorities. An incorrect approach would be to advise Mr. Henderson to omit the past speeding conviction from his application, arguing that it was a minor offense from a long time ago and unlikely to be discovered. This is a direct violation of the Highway Traffic Act's requirement for truthful disclosure of all relevant information. The ethical failure here is facilitating dishonesty and potentially misleading the Ministry of Transportation. Another incorrect approach would be to submit the application without verifying the accuracy of all details, assuming Mr. Henderson has completed it correctly. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and professional responsibility. While not actively dishonest, it fails to uphold the professional obligation to ensure compliance with regulations and could inadvertently lead to the submission of inaccurate information, which carries its own set of consequences under the Act. A further incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the current driving test readiness and disregard the application process's documentation requirements. The Highway Traffic Act mandates specific documentation and information for license issuance. Ignoring this aspect of the process, even with the intention of helping Mr. Henderson pass the test, is professionally negligent and legally unsound. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves prioritizing regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. First, thoroughly understand the relevant legislation, in this case, the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and Ministry of Transportation guidelines. Second, meticulously review all documentation and information provided by the applicant, cross-referencing with legal requirements. Third, clearly and honestly advise the applicant on their obligations and the potential consequences of non-compliance. Finally, ensure all actions taken are transparent and defensible under the law and ethical codes of conduct. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a driver applying for a learner permit in Carlow, Ireland, has a prior driving disqualification that is still within the statutory period for disclosure. What is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with the Road Traffic Act 2010 and ethical licensing practices? Option A. Fully disclose the previous disqualification on the learner permit application form. Option B. Submit the learner permit application form without mentioning the disqualification, intending to inform the driving tester later. Option C. Omit the previous disqualification from the learner permit application form, assuming it will not be discovered. Option D. State on the learner permit application form that the applicant is unsure if the disqualification needs to be disclosed. The correct answer is A. Fully disclose the previous disqualification on the learner permit application form. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a Carlow, Ireland, learner's permit. The challenge lies in accurately and truthfully representing their driving history, particularly concerning a previous disqualification, to the relevant authorities. Failure to do so can have significant legal and licensing consequences. Careful judgment is required to ensure full compliance with the Road Traffic Act 2010 and associated regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a complete and transparent disclosure of all relevant driving history, including any previous disqualifications, when completing the learner permit application form for Carlow. This approach aligns directly with the legal obligation under the Road Traffic Act 2010, which mandates that applicants provide truthful and accurate information. The application form itself will likely contain declarations to this effect, and failing to disclose a disqualification is a breach of these statutory requirements, potentially leading to the permit being revoked and further penalties. Honesty and full disclosure are fundamental ethical principles in all licensing applications. Incorrect approaches analysis, providing incomplete information by omitting the previous disqualification, is a direct contravention of the Road Traffic Act 2010. This constitutes a false declaration, which can result in the learner permit being invalidated, a fine, and potentially a ban from reapplying for a period. Ethically, it is dishonest and undermines the integrity of the licensing system. Attempting to circumvent the disclosure requirement by claiming ignorance of the disqualification, especially if it was a formal legal process, is also a failure. The onus is on the applicant to be aware of their driving record and any legal sanctions imposed. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an attempt to mislead the licensing authority. Submitting the application with the intention of disclosing the disqualification at a later stage, perhaps during a driving test, is also professionally unacceptable. The application form is the designated point for providing all necessary information. Delaying disclosure is a form of non-disclosure at the required time and can be viewed as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage or avoid scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a framework of absolute honesty and full disclosure. This involves carefully reading and understanding all questions on the application form and providing truthful answers based on their complete driving history. If there is any doubt about what information needs to be disclosed, it is always best to err on the side of caution and provide the information, or seek clarification from the relevant licensing authority, e.g., the National Driver Licence Service in Ireland. The principle of duty of care extends to ensuring that all information provided to regulatory bodies is accurate and complete. Question 10. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, is evaluating a learner's readiness for their G2 road test. The learner has expressed significant confidence and has completed the mandatory supervised driving hours. The instructor has recorded the number of minor and critical errors during the last 10 supervised practice sessions. In these sessions, the learner committed an average of 3 minor errors per session and 0.5 critical errors per session. The MTO's internal guidelines suggest that for a learner to be considered ready for the G2 test, they should consistently demonstrate fewer than 2 minor errors per session and 0 critical errors per session over their last 5 practice sessions. If the learner's error rate over the last 5 sessions was Session 1, 4 minor, 1 critical. Session 2, 3 minor, 0 critical. Session 3, 2 minor, 0 critical. Session 4, 3 minor, 1 critical. Session 5, 4 minor, 0 critical. Based on this data and the MTO guidelines, what is the most appropriate course of action for the instructor? Option A. Advise the learner that they are not yet ready for the G2 road test and recommend further practice focusing on reducing both minor and critical errors to meet the MTO guidelines. Option B. Book the G2 road test, but inform the learner that they may encounter difficulties due to their error rate, relying on the examiner's discretion. Option C. Suggest the learner take the test and focus on their strengths, as the average number of critical errors is low and the mandatory practice hours have been met. Option D. Book the G2 road test immediately, as the learner's overall average error rate across all 10 sessions is within acceptable limits and their confidence is high. The correct answer is A. Advise the learner that they are not yet ready for the G2 road test and recommend further practice focusing on reducing both minor and critical errors to meet the MTO guidelines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, who is responsible for assessing a learner's readiness for the road test. The challenge lies in balancing the learner's perceived confidence and desire to book the test with the instructor's professional obligation to ensure public safety and adherence to Ontario's graduated licensing system. The instructor must make a data-driven decision, not solely based on the learner's emotional state or the instructor's personal convenience. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the learner's performance against the established criteria for the G2 road test in Ontario. This includes reviewing the learner's progress in mastering specific driving skills, e.g., lane changes, intersection management, hazard perception, and their consistency in demonstrating safe driving habits. The instructor should calculate the learner's error rate based on a standardized checklist or a similar objective metric. For instance, if the instructor has been tracking the number of critical errors during practice sessions, it can project the likelihood of the learner passing based on historical data and the typical passing threshold. A common benchmark for readiness might be achieving a consistent error rate below a certain threshold, say, fewer than 5 minor errors and 0 critical errors over the last 5 supervised practice sessions. This data-driven approach aligns with the Ministry of Transportation Ontario's MTO mandate to ensure drivers are competent and safe, thereby upholding public trust and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to book the test solely because the learner expresses high confidence and has completed the minimum required practice hours. This ignores the objective assessment of skills and the potential for overconfidence leading to unsafe driving. It fails to meet the professional duty of care and regulatory expectation for demonstrable competence. Another incorrect approach is to book the test based on the instructor's personal schedule or a desire to generate revenue. This prioritizes the instructor's interests over the learner's safety and the integrity of the licensing process, which is a clear ethical and regulatory breach. A third incorrect approach is to book the test based on a subjective feeling that the learner seems ready without any quantifiable data or objective performance metrics. This relies on intuition rather than evidence, which is insufficient for a decision with public safety implications and does not align with the structured assessment required by the MTO. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Clearly defining objective performance standards for the target test. 2. Regularly and objectively assessing the learner's performance against these standards, ideally using a quantifiable metric. 3. Comparing the learner's current performance data against the established benchmarks for readiness. 4. Communicating the assessment findings transparently to the learner, explaining the rationale for booking or delaying the test. 5. Always erring on the side of caution when public safety is a factor. Question 11. The performance metrics show a concerning trend of Carlow drivers consistently failing the parallel parking maneuver on their driving tests. As a senior examiner, what is the most appropriate initial course of action to address this trend? Option A. Immediately increase the strictness of the parallel parking assessment to ensure only the most proficient drivers pass. Option B. Implement a system where examiners can make minor discretionary adjustments to the parallel parking scoring based on their professional judgment of the applicant's overall driving ability. Option C. Initiate a review of the parallel parking assessment criteria and examiner calibration to ensure consistency and identify any potential systemic issues contributing to the high failure rate. Option D. Advise all Carlow driving instructors to dedicate significantly more lesson time to parallel parking, assuming driver preparation is the sole issue. The correct answer is C. Initiate a review of the parallel parking assessment criteria and examiner calibration to ensure consistency and identify any potential systemic issues contributing to the high failure rate. Explanation. The performance metrics show a consistent pattern of drivers failing the parallel parking maneuver during the Carlow driver's test. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the need for rigorous adherence to testing standards with the potential for systemic issues affecting driver performance. Careful judgment is required to determine if the failure rate indicates a need for intervention beyond simply marking tests as failed. The best approach involves a thorough, data-driven review of the testing process and examiner consistency. This means analyzing the specific reasons for failure, cross-referencing examiner feedback, and potentially observing multiple examiners conducting the parallel parking section. This approach is correct because it aligns with the overarching ethical and regulatory duty of ensuring fair and consistent testing standards, as mandated by the Irish Road Safety Authority, RSA guidelines for driver testing. It seeks to identify root causes, whether they lie in the test design, examiner application, or driver preparation, thereby promoting a more effective and equitable testing system for all Carlow applicants. An approach that focuses solely on increasing the difficulty of the parallel parking section without understanding the underlying reasons for failure is incorrect. This would be an arbitrary response that fails to address potential systemic issues and could unfairly penalize drivers. Disregards the RSA's emphasis on objective and standardized assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the performance metrics as simply reflecting poor driver preparation. While driver preparation is a factor, a significant and consistent failure rate suggests a need for deeper investigation into the testing process itself, including examiner calibration and the clarity of instructions provided during the test. This approach fails to uphold the examiner's responsibility to contribute to the integrity of the testing system. Finally, an approach that involves anecdotal adjustments to marking criteria based on individual examiner preferences would be highly problematic. This directly contravenes the RSA's requirement for standardized and objective assessment, leading to unfairness and inconsistency across tests. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with objective data analysis. When performance metrics reveal anomalies, the next step is to investigate potential causes systematically. This involves consulting relevant guidelines, seeking clarification from supervisors if necessary, and considering all stakeholders, including applicants, examiners, and the regulatory body. The goal is always to uphold the integrity and fairness of the testing process. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that a commercial driver operating in Ontario, after conducting a pre-trip inspection, noted a minor squeak in the braking system and a loose mud flap, but did not record these issues on the daily vehicle inspection report, believing them to be insignificant. Which approach best aligns with the requirements of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act and professional driving standards? Option A. Only documenting the loose mud flap, as the squeaking brake was perceived as a minor issue that did not immediately affect stopping power. Option B. Not documenting either issue, as they were considered minor and did not prevent the vehicle from being driven. Option C. Repairing the loose mud flap oneself before completing the report and not mentioning either issue. Option D. Documenting both the squeaking brake and the loose mud flap on the daily vehicle inspection report, and reporting these to the supervisor as per company policy. The correct answer is D. Documenting both the squeaking brake and the loose mud flap on the daily vehicle inspection report, and reporting these to the supervisor as per company policy. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, HTA, concerning the proper documentation and reporting of vehicle defects identified during a pre-trip inspection. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to balance the immediate need to operate the vehicle with the legal obligation to ensure its roadworthiness and to accurately record any identified issues. Failure to comply can result in significant penalties for the driver and the operator, and more importantly, compromise public safety. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting all identified defects, regardless of perceived severity, and reporting them to the appropriate supervisor or designated person as per the operator's policy and the HTA. This approach ensures that all vehicle issues are formally acknowledged, prioritized for repair, and that a clear record exists for audit and legal purposes. The HTA mandates that drivers ensure their vehicle is in a safe operating condition before commencing a trip and to report any defects. Proper documentation is the mechanism by which this reporting is proven and managed. Failing to document minor defects, even if the driver believes they do not immediately impact safety, is a regulatory failure. The HTA does not provide a threshold for what constitutes a reportable defect. All defects must be recorded. This approach risks overlooking issues that could escalate or contribute to a larger problem, and it bypasses the operator's established safety management system. Another incorrect approach is to only report defects that are immediately obvious or severe. This is a regulatory failure because it relies on subjective judgment rather than objective documentation of all identified issues. The HTA requires a comprehensive inspection and reporting of all defects, not just those that are readily apparent or critical. Finally, attempting to repair a defect without proper authorization or documentation before reporting it is also a regulatory and ethical failure. This undermines the operator's maintenance procedures and creates a situation where the vehicle's condition is altered without a formal record, potentially leading to further safety concerns or non-compliance with maintenance logs. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and safety. This involves understanding the specific requirements of the HTA and the operator's internal policies, conducting thorough inspections, documenting all findings accurately and promptly, and communicating these findings through the established channels. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and over-documentation. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, is evaluating a candidate for their G2 road test. The candidate has successfully executed all required maneuvers, including parallel parking and three-point turns, with only minor, easily correctable errors. However, during the test, the candidate hesitated briefly before proceeding at a green light when there was no immediate traffic, and they were observed to be slightly nervous. Based on these observations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the instructor? Option A. Fail the candidate due to the hesitation at the green light, as this indicates a potential lack of confidence and decisiveness required for safe operation of a vehicle in all traffic situations. Option B. Pass the candidate, as they have demonstrated the ability to perform all required maneuvers safely and have shown a consistent understanding of traffic laws, with the minor hesitation and nervousness not indicating a fundamental lack of competence for independent driving. Option C. Pass the candidate, prioritizing their enthusiasm and apparent desire to learn over strict adherence to minor performance details, as they have shown a willingness to improve. Option D. Fail the candidate because nervousness is a clear sign that they are not yet ready for independent driving and could pose a risk to themselves and others on the road. The correct answer is B. Pass the candidate, as they have demonstrated the ability to perform all required maneuvers safely and have shown a consistent understanding of traffic laws, with the minor hesitation and nervousness not indicating a fundamental lack of competence for independent driving. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, due to the inherent responsibility of ensuring a candidate's readiness for independent driving. The instructor must balance the candidate's perceived readiness with the objective safety standards mandated by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, MTO. Failure to accurately assess a candidate's skills can lead to licensing individuals who pose a risk to themselves and other road users, while overly cautious assessment can unfairly impede a candidate's progress. This requires a nuanced judgment that goes beyond simply observing a few driving maneuvers. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive evaluation of the candidate's ability to consistently demonstrate safe driving habits and adherence to all traffic laws across a variety of driving conditions. This includes not only the execution of specific maneuvers, but also the candidate's decision-making processes, hazard perception, and overall situational awareness. This approach aligns with the MTO's objective of licensing competent and safe drivers, as outlined in the Ontario Driver's Handbook and the requirements for the G2 and G road tests. The instructor must be confident that the candidate can operate a vehicle safely and responsibly without direct supervision, which is the core principle of licensing. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to focus solely on the candidate's ability to perform specific maneuvers perfectly, such as parallel parking or three-point turns, without adequately assessing their judgment in real-world traffic situations. This fails to address the broader requirement of safe and responsible driving, which encompasses hazard identification and reaction, adherence to speed limits, and appropriate lane changes. This approach risks licensing a candidate who can execute isolated tasks, but lacks the critical thinking skills needed for unpredictable road conditions. Another incorrect approach is to pass the candidate based on their perceived enthusiasm or the instructor's personal liking for them, disregarding objective performance standards. This introduces bias and compromises the integrity of the licensing process. The MTO's regulations are designed to ensure a standardized and objective assessment of driving competency, and personal feelings have no place in this evaluation. A further incorrect approach is to fail the candidate based on minor, infrequent errors that do not fundamentally compromise safety, especially if the candidate has otherwise demonstrated consistent safe driving. While perfection is not expected, the assessment should focus on significant safety deficiencies or a pattern of errors that indicate a lack of competence. Overly strict adherence to minor details without considering the overall safe performance can be detrimental to the candidate's progress and is not in line with the MTO's goal of licensing safe, rather than perfect, drivers. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and adherence to regulatory standards. This involves 1. understanding the specific requirements and objectives of the licensing body, MTO in this case. 2. Conducting a thorough and objective assessment based on observable behaviors and demonstrated skills. 3. Considering the candidate's ability to apply learned skills in diverse and potentially challenging driving environments. 4. Maintaining professional impartiality and avoiding personal biases. 5. Documenting the assessment process and the rationale for the decision. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver's ability to react responsibly to unexpected events is crucial. While driving on a busy provincial highway in Ontario, you observe a vehicle ahead of you swerving erratically and the driver appears to be in distress. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Speed up to pass the erratic vehicle quickly to avoid any potential collision. Option B. Continue driving at your current speed and attempt to signal to the other driver to pull over. Option C. Safely pull over to the shoulder of the road as soon as it is safe to do so, then assess the situation and consider calling for assistance. Option D. Maintain your current position and observe the other vehicle's behavior without taking any immediate action. The correct answer is C. Safely pull over to the shoulder of the road as soon as it is safe to do so, then assess the situation and consider calling for assistance. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a driver's ability to make sound judgments under pressure is paramount for safe operation of a vehicle. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to prioritize immediate safety and adherence to traffic laws over personal convenience or the perceived urgency of another road user. The applicant must demonstrate an understanding of their responsibilities as a driver and the potential consequences of their actions. The best approach involves immediately and safely bringing the vehicle to a stop at the side of the road, away from traffic, and then assessing the situation. This allows the driver to address the emergency without compromising their own safety or the safety of others. This is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety, which dictates that drivers must not endanger themselves or others. Specifically, in Ontario, the Highway Traffic Act mandates that drivers must operate their vehicles in a safe manner and avoid actions that could lead to collisions or hazards. Stopping the vehicle allows for a controlled response to the emergency, preventing potential panic-induced errors. An incorrect approach would be to continue driving while attempting to assist the other driver. This is a regulatory failure because it diverts the driver's attention from the primary task of operating the vehicle safely, increasing the risk of an accident. It also potentially obstructs traffic and could lead to a violation of rules regarding stopping or parking in unsafe locations. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and continue to the destination. This is ethically problematic and demonstrates a lack of civic responsibility. While not always a direct violation of a specific traffic law, it fails to uphold the broader expectation of drivers to be aware of and responsive to genuine emergencies on the road, potentially delaying critical assistance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a rapid assessment of risk. The driver must first consider their own safety and the safety of other road users. If an immediate stop is safe and feasible, it is generally the preferred course of action. If not, the driver should proceed to the nearest safe location to assess the situation further. The driver should also consider whether calling emergency services is appropriate. Question 15. Strategic planning requires a driver's test applicant in Ontario, Canada, to effectively prepare for their examination. Considering the regulatory framework set by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, which preparation strategy best aligns with the objective of demonstrating safe and competent driving skills? Option A. Thoroughly studying the official Ontario Driver's Handbook, practicing all required maneuvers in diverse conditions, and understanding the specific expectations outlined by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation for the road test. Option B. Believing that extensive driving experience in another country or province negates the need for specific preparation for the Ontario driver's test. Option C. Relying primarily on advice from friends and family who have recently passed their Ontario driver's test, focusing on common driving scenarios they mention. Option D. Concentrating solely on mastering the physical control of the vehicle, such as steering and braking, assuming that practical skill alone will suffice for the test. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly studying the official Ontario Driver's Handbook, practicing all required maneuvers in diverse conditions, and understanding the specific expectations outlined by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation for the road test. Explanation. Strategic planning requires careful consideration of various factors to ensure successful outcomes. In the context of a driver's test in Ontario, Canada, this involves understanding the specific requirements and expectations set by the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, MTO. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate not just the mechanical ability to drive, but also a thorough understanding of road rules, safe driving practices, and the ability to make sound judgments in complex traffic situations, all within the specific legal framework of Ontario. The examiner's role is to assess these competencies objectively, and the applicant's preparation must align with these standards. Failure to do so can result in a failed test, requiring further time and expense. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the Ontario Driver's Handbook, focusing on all sections related to safe driving practices, road signs, signals, and right-of-way rules. This should be supplemented with practical driving experience in various conditions, simulating potential test scenarios. The applicant should also familiarize themselves with the specific requirements of the road test, such as parallel parking, three-point turns, and highway driving, as outlined by the MTO. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the MTO's stated objectives for the driver's examination, which are to ensure that drivers possess the necessary knowledge and skills to operate a vehicle safely and in compliance with Ontario's Highway Traffic Act. Ethical considerations are met by preparing thoroughly and honestly, without seeking to circumvent the testing process. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice from friends or family who have recently taken the test. While well-intentioned, this advice may be outdated, incomplete, or not aligned with the official MTO curriculum. This could lead to a misunderstanding of critical rules or procedures, resulting in a failed test and a violation of the principle of demonstrating competence according to established standards. Another incorrect approach is to focus only on the mechanical aspects of driving, such as steering and braking, while neglecting the theoretical knowledge of traffic laws and safe driving techniques. This fails to meet the MTO's requirement for a holistic assessment of driving ability, which includes both practical skills and theoretical understanding. A further incorrect approach is to assume that prior driving experience in another jurisdiction automatically qualifies an individual for a license in Ontario without specific preparation for the MTO's testing standards. This overlooks the unique regulations and driving culture of Ontario, potentially leading to a failure to comply with local laws and safe driving expectations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach to preparation. This involves identifying the authoritative source of information, the MTO Driver's Handbook, understanding the assessment criteria, and engaging in practice that directly mirrors the expected performance. A decision-making framework should prioritize adherence to regulations, ethical conduct, and the pursuit of genuine competence over shortcuts or assumptions. Question 16. The assessment process reveals their driving instructor in Carlow has a student who is eager to book their driving test, but is demonstrably not yet meeting the required standards for safe and independent driving, according to the Carlow driver's test syllabus. The instructor is concerned about the student's ability to pass and the potential safety implications of them driving unsupervised. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the instructor? Option A, postpone a definitive decision about test readiness, telling the student to keep practicing without providing specific guidance or a clear timeline for reassessment. Option B, advise the student that they are close enough and encourage them to book the test, suggesting the instructor can help them manage the examiner. Option C, urge the student to book the test immediately, implying that the instructor will ensure they pass regardless of their current skill level. Option D, honestly inform the student they are not yet ready, provide specific feedback on areas needing improvement, and outline a plan for further practice and instruction before re-evaluating test readiness. The correct answer is D. Honestly inform the student they are not yet ready, provide specific feedback on areas needing improvement, and outline a plan for further practice and instruction before re-evaluating test readiness. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge faced by driving instructors, balancing the need to ensure a candidate is fully prepared for their test with the ethical obligation not to mislead or exploit the candidate's desire to pass. This scenario is professionally challenging because the instructor holds significant power over the candidate's progress and financial investment. The instructor must exercise sound judgment to uphold the integrity of the licensing process and the safety of the public, while also maintaining a professional relationship with the student. The best approach involves a direct and honest assessment of the candidate's readiness based on established Carlow driver's test standards. This means clearly communicating to the candidate that they are not yet meeting the required proficiency for a safe and successful test. The instructor should then provide specific, actionable feedback on the areas needing improvement, outlining a clear plan for further practice and instruction tailored to address these weaknesses. This aligns with the ethical duty of the instructor to act in the best interest of public safety and to provide genuine instruction, rather than simply aiming for a pass at any cost. It also adheres to the spirit of the Carlow driver's test, which is designed to certify competent drivers. An approach that suggests the candidate might be close enough and encourages them to take the test despite clear deficiencies is professionally unacceptable. This fails to uphold the instructor's responsibility to ensure road safety and misrepresents the candidate's actual skill level. It exploits the candidate's desire to pass and potentially puts them, and others, at risk on the road. This action undermines the credibility of the instructor and the licensing system. Another unacceptable approach is to postpone the decision indefinitely without providing clear reasons or a path forward. While avoiding confrontation, this creates uncertainty for the candidate and fails to address the core issue of their readiness. It can lead to frustration and a lack of progress, ultimately not serving the candidate's best interests or the objectives of driver training. Finally, an approach that pressures the candidate to book the test immediately, implying that the instructor will help them through it, is unethical and potentially fraudulent. This suggests a willingness to compromise testing standards for financial gain or to avoid difficult conversations. It is a direct violation of the instructor's duty to provide honest and competent instruction and to ensure candidates are genuinely qualified to drive. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes honesty, transparency, and adherence to established standards. This involves 1. Objective assessment, evaluating the candidate's performance against the specific criteria of the Carlow driver's test. 2. Clear communication, articulating the assessment findings, both strengths and weaknesses, in a constructive manner. 3. Actionable guidance, developing a tailored plan for improvement. 4. Ethical consideration, always placing public safety and the integrity of the licensing process above immediate client satisfaction or financial expediency. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows that during a Carlow driving test, an applicant is approaching a pedestrian crossing when a child suddenly darts out from behind a parked car directly into the path of the vehicle. What is the most appropriate immediate response for the applicant? Option A. Slam on the brakes as hard as possible, causing a sudden, jarring stop. Option B. Swerve sharply to the left to avoid the child without checking mirrors. Option C. Accelerate to try and pass the child before they reach the main part of the crossing. Option D. Apply the brakes firmly but smoothly, preparing to stop safely while maintaining awareness of traffic behind. The correct answer is D. Apply the brakes firmly but smoothly, preparing to stop safely while maintaining awareness of traffic behind. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that assessing a driver's ability to navigate complex traffic situations requires a nuanced approach, especially when dealing with unexpected events. This scenario is professionally challenging because it tests the applicant's ability to prioritize safety and adhere to traffic laws under pressure, rather than simply demonstrating rote knowledge of rules. The examiner must discern genuine understanding and responsible decision-making from mere memorization. The best approach involves a calm, controlled reaction that prioritizes immediate safety and adherence to traffic regulations. This means slowing down, assessing the situation without panicking, and making a decision that minimizes risk to oneself and others, even if it means deviating slightly from the most direct route or causing a minor inconvenience. This aligns with the core principles of safe driving, which emphasize defensive driving techniques and the paramount importance of avoiding accidents. The Carlow driver testing regulations, while not explicitly detailing every emergency scenario, implicitly mandate that drivers operate their vehicles in a manner that is safe and considerate of other road users. This approach demonstrates an understanding of these underlying principles. An incorrect approach would be to brake suddenly and aggressively without assessing the surrounding traffic. This could lead to a rear-end collision, creating a more dangerous situation than the initial hazard. It fails to demonstrate an understanding of defensive driving and the need to maintain situational awareness. Another incorrect approach is to swerve sharply into another lane without checking mirrors or blind spots. This action is inherently dangerous, risking a collision with another vehicle and demonstrating a lack of control and consideration for other road users, directly contravening safe driving practices. Finally, accelerating through the hazard to beat, it is reckless and demonstrates a disregard for potential consequences and the safety of others, a clear violation of safe driving principles. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Immediate threat assessment. Quickly identify the nature and severity of the hazard. 2. Risk evaluation. Determine the potential consequences of various actions. 3. Rule adherence. Consider all applicable traffic laws and regulations. 4. Safety prioritization. Choose the action that most effectively mitigates risk and ensures the safety of all involved. 5. Controlled execution. Implement the chosen action calmly and deliberately. Question 18. Analysis of a driving scenario in Ontario. You are approaching an intersection with a pedestrian on the sidewalk to your right. The pedestrian is looking in the opposite direction of traffic and appears to be waiting to cross, though they have not yet stepped off the curb. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Honk your horn to alert the pedestrian to move faster. Option B. Proceed through the intersection at your normal speed, assuming the pedestrian will not enter the roadway. Option C. Accelerate to pass the pedestrian before they reach the intersection. Option D. Slow down and be prepared to stop, yielding to the pedestrian if they show any intention of entering the roadway. The correct answer is D. Slow down and be prepared to stop, yielding to the pedestrian if they show any intention of entering the roadway. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to make an immediate decision under pressure, balancing the need to proceed with caution against the potential for causing a hazard or contravening traffic laws. The driver must interpret the actions of other road users and the prevailing conditions to make a safe and legal maneuver. The presence of a pedestrian, even if not directly in the path, introduces an element of unpredictability and heightened responsibility. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a cautious and observant approach. This means stopping or yielding to allow the pedestrian to cross safely, even if they are not directly in the immediate path of the vehicle. This aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety, which prioritizes the vulnerability of pedestrians and the need to avoid any action that could be perceived as intimidating or dangerous to them. In Ontario, the Highway Traffic Act emphasizes the duty of care drivers owe to pedestrians, requiring them to yield the right-of-way in situations where a pedestrian might enter the roadway. This approach demonstrates responsible driving and adherence to the spirit of traffic regulations designed to protect all road users. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding without stopping, assuming the pedestrian will not enter the roadway, is a failure to exercise due care and attention. This approach disregards the unpredictable nature of pedestrian behavior and could lead to a dangerous situation, potentially violating the driver's duty to avoid collisions. It also fails to uphold the principle of prioritizing vulnerable road users, accelerating to pass the pedestrian before they reach the intersection, even if there is no direct obstruction, is an aggressive maneuver. This action can be perceived as intimidating by the pedestrian and increases the risk of an incident if the pedestrian decides to cross unexpectedly. It demonstrates a lack of consideration for the pedestrian's presence and a disregard for safe passing distances. Honking the horn to alert the pedestrian to move faster is an inappropriate and potentially aggressive response. This action can startle or agitate the pedestrian, leading to unpredictable behavior and increasing the risk of an accident. It is not a recognized or ethical method of managing pedestrian traffic and contravenes the expectation of courteous and safe interaction on the road. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, legal compliance, and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Observation, thoroughly assessing the immediate environment, including all road users and potential hazards. 2. Risk assessment, evaluating the potential risks associated with each possible action, particularly concerning vulnerable road users. 3. Legal compliance, ensuring all actions adhere to the relevant traffic laws and regulations of the jurisdiction, in this case Ontario. 4. Ethical consideration, acting in a manner that is courteous, considerate, and prioritizes the well-being of others. In situations involving pedestrians, a conservative approach that errs on the side of caution is always the most professional and responsible choice. Question 19. The review process indicates that a Carlow driver theory test examiner recognizes a candidate scheduled for a test as a close personal friend. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examiner to ensure the integrity of the testing process in accordance with Irish Road Safety Authority (RSA) guidelines? Option A. Discreetly ask a colleague to administer the test for that candidate without formally declaring the personal connection to the supervisor. Option B. Immediately inform their supervisor of the personal connection and recuse themselves from administering or supervising that specific test. Option C. Privately advise the candidate about the personal connection and instruct them to be particularly diligent during the test. Option D. Proceed with administering the test, but make a conscious effort to be extra fair and impartial to compensate for the personal relationship. Correct answer is B. Immediately inform their supervisor of the personal connection and recuse themselves from administering or supervising that specific test. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest scenario during a Carlow driver theory test administration. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the integrity of the testing process with personal relationships, adhering strictly to the regulations set forth by the Irish Road Safety Authority (RSA) and the specific guidelines for Carlow driver theory test centers. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining impartiality and preventing any perception of unfair advantage. The correct approach involves immediately declaring the personal connection to the candidate and recusing oneself from any involvement in the administration or supervision of that specific test. This is paramount for upholding the principle of fairness and integrity in the testing process, as mandated by RSA guidelines which emphasize impartiality and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. By stepping aside, the examiner ensures that the test is conducted by an unbiased individual, thereby safeguarding the validity of the results and maintaining public trust in the driver testing system. This aligns with ethical standards of professional conduct expected of all test center personnel. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with administering the test while attempting to be extra vigilant or fair. This is problematic because even with the best intentions, the personal relationship can unconsciously influence the examiner's behavior or create a perception of bias among other candidates or observers. It fails to address the fundamental requirement of avoiding any appearance of impropriety, which is a cornerstone of fair testing procedures. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the test administration to a colleague without formally declaring the conflict of interest. While this might seem like a practical solution, it bypasses the crucial step of transparency. The colleague may not be aware of the potential for unconscious bias or the need for heightened scrutiny, and the lack of formal declaration means the conflict remains unaddressed at an official level, potentially leading to issues if the test is later reviewed. A further incorrect approach is to inform the candidate privately that they are related and ask them to be extra careful. This is unacceptable as it places the burden of managing the conflict on the candidate and does not remove the examiner from the situation. It also risks compromising the confidentiality of the test and potentially influencing the candidate's behavior in a way that is not part of the standard testing protocol. The professional decision-making process in such situations should follow a clear framework. 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consult relevant policies and regulations, in this case, RSA guidelines for driver testing centers. 3. Declare the conflict of interest to the appropriate authority or supervisor. 4. Recuse oneself from any duties related to the situation where the conflict exists. 5. Ensure that an impartial and unbiased alternative is in place. 6. Document the actions taken. Question 20. Performance analysis shows that a driving student in Ontario, Canada, has consistently demonstrated proficiency in all aspects of the G2 road test, except for the parallel parking maneuver. While they can execute the maneuver, they frequently require more than 3 adjustments to position the vehicle within the marked space, and the final placement is often slightly crooked. The student is eager to take their test next week and has expressed concern about failing if they cannot perfect the parallel park. If the student's overall driving is safe and they understand the principles of hazard perception and speed control, what is the most appropriate course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Insist that the student must achieve perfect parallel parking within 2 adjustments and a perfectly straight final position before the instructor will allow them to book their G2 road test, regardless of their proficiency in other areas. Option B. Advise the student that while their parallel parking needs improvement, their overall safe driving and understanding of road rules are strong, and recommend proceeding with the G2 test, emphasizing continued practice of parallel parking independently after obtaining their license. Option C. Suggest the student focus solely on practicing the parallel park for the remainder of their lessons, neglecting other aspects of driving, to ensure they can pass this specific maneuver on test day. Option D. Recommend the student take the G2 road test immediately, with the understanding that the examiner might be lenient on the parallel parking if the rest of their driving is satisfactory. The correct answer is B. Advise the student that while their parallel parking needs improvement, their overall safe driving and understanding of road rules are strong, and recommend proceeding with the G2 test, emphasizing continued practice of parallel parking independently after obtaining their license. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Ontario, Canada, by requiring them to balance the immediate need for a student to pass their G2 road test with the paramount importance of ensuring the student possesses the necessary skills for safe, independent driving. The pressure from the student and the potential impact on their future mobility create a complex ethical and professional dilemma. Careful judgment is required to uphold road safety standards while also supporting the student's progress. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough assessment of the student's readiness based on objective performance criteria and adherence to the Ontario Ministry of Transportation's MTO G2 road test standards. This approach prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. The instructor must objectively evaluate the student's ability to execute all required maneuvers, demonstrate consistent hazard perception, and adhere to all traffic laws and safe driving practices as outlined in the Ontario Driver's Handbook and MTO testing criteria. If the student consistently demonstrates proficiency in these areas, including the ability to perform a parallel park within acceptable parameters and with minimal errors, then proceeding to the test is appropriate. The instructor's role is to prepare the student to meet the established standards, not to circumvent them. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the road test despite the student's inability to consistently perform a parallel park within the acceptable range of the MTO's criteria, such as requiring more than 3 adjustments or ending up significantly outside the marked space. This approach fails to uphold the regulatory requirement of demonstrating competence in essential driving skills, as parallel parking is a critical component of the G2 test. Ethically, it compromises road safety by potentially allowing an inadequately prepared driver onto public roads. Another incorrect approach is to artificially inflate the student's perceived readiness by focusing solely on passing the test rather than on developing comprehensive safe driving habits. This might involve practicing only the specific routes or scenarios likely to appear on the test, neglecting broader defensive driving techniques or the ability to adapt to unexpected situations. This approach violates the ethical obligation to produce safe drivers and disregards the spirit of the MTO's licensing process, which aims to ensure a minimum standard of competency for public safety. A further incorrect approach is to recommend the student take the test without adequate practice of the parallel park, hoping they will get lucky on the day. This relies on chance rather than demonstrated skill, and directly contradicts the MTO's requirement for proficiency in all tested maneuvers. It demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for the safety of the student and other road users. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Objective assessment. Continuously evaluate the student's performance against established standards and criteria e.g. MTO G2 testing requirements. 2. Skill development. Focus on building a strong foundation of safe driving habits and proficiency in all required maneuvers, not just test-taking strategies. 3. Risk management. Honestly assess the risks associated with a student's current skill level and the potential consequences of proceeding to a test or independent driving prematurely. 4. Ethical responsibility. Uphold the professional duty to ensure that licensed drivers are competent and safe, thereby protecting the public.